Hello, my name is Lester Bruce Hunt. I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History program. Today is Friday, August 25th, and I am here with Stanley Michelsen.
Michelsen.
Stanley Michelsen. Sorry.
Not a problem.
So, where were you born and when?
I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on August 19th, 1949.
Did you grow up in a military family?
No, but my dad was in World War II.
Where exactly did you grow up, and what was that like?
Grew up in Pompano Beach, Florida from the age of 5. Went to Pompano Beach Elementary, junior and senior high school. Back when you could kick the can on the street and drink out of a hose, back in those days.
What led you to make the decision to join the armed forces, and what branch were you in?
Well, my dad, of course, fought in World War II, and my brother Eric had joined the Navy, and he was on a destroyer.
Wow.
And when I graduated high school, the Vietnam War was in full swing. You either had to go to college and make good grades, or there weren't a lot of options because you were going to go into the draft or whatever. So I just joined so I could do what I wanted to do rather than be put somewhere else.
What did your family think when you entered the military?
Didn't like it at all.
No.
Well, they knew I wanted to go to Vietnam. I said, want to go fight for my country.
Right.
And they were like, oh my God. So, well, I think they were more, let's say they were more frightened for me and my thoughts and what I wanted to do than say that they didn't want me in the military.
Okay. Where did you go to boot camp, and what was that like for you?
Well, boot camp was a Marine. I was in the Army. So
Army.
Army is forts, and I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training.
Okay. And what was Fort Jackson?
Yeah.
How was that compared to, say, other forts?
Well, I was only in a couple because I just went straight to Vietnam. But I mean, not really straight, but it was basic training. It was like dirty, nasty, being yelled at all the time. And but there's always the main thing that you remember. I knew quick was first I shaved my hair before I got there, so they couldn't do it. And then there was always somebody that is dumb enough to stick out and always get yelled at. So I just was happy that person existed in my platoon and in my barracks. So kept their eyes off of me. So I could slide through a little easier through basic training. But it wasn't easy, of course, you know.
Fair enough. Can you describe the training you received?
You mean in basic training? You get the basics. I mean, from running.
The specialization.
After that, I went to special training. Was at Fort Bragg at the JFK Center for Special Warfare.
Oh, wow.
That's where I got into psychological operations and PSYOPs. And the training for PSYOPs, the War College professors would come. You'd have those kind of things, and you would also have medical. Weapons, they'd always, you had to break down all the weapons the U.S. was using. You had to break down all the weapons that the North Vietnamese were using. You had to do all those, learn all those kinds of things over a 9-month period. I did that. Then we had hand-to-hand combat over at the 82nd Airborne Division's hand-to-hand combat pits called what do they call it, 82nd Airborne, the Animal Farm. So we'd go to the Animal Farm pits and have that. They'd do a week of that. You go back to it later, back and forth from different stations. And then, of course, setting up ambushes and, you know, it was everything you would need, but it was every weapon. And they would, when it got to where you had to do it in the dark, they would add extra pieces, but I had already heard that they would do that. And I'd worked and worked and knew every piece breaking down a weapon. So
you were breaking down weapons in the dark and
even the enemy's weapons. Yeah.
Wow.
With added pieces, I might add, because they wanted to throw you off. And I would say, I'm done. And they go, well, you still have pieces left. I said, no, I don't. But I was given a heads up by someone else before that happened. I don't remember who, but I knew that there'd be extra pieces there. That's why I worked hard at knowing my pieces by my feel.
Right. How did your training apply once you were in Vietnam?
I would say maybe 25% of it was useful. I learned really quick from my first HB Combat PSYOP team leader, who was Ed Dulca, but we call him the Hulk. And he took me out on my first mission into the DMZ, and you learn quick that everything is changed. This is a life. First, we're in the Army, and we're attached to the 3rd Marine Division. So we're not wanted there to begin with. And then it goes downhill from there, basically.
Can you describe your impressions of the camp you were in? Did you consider it secure? Did anyone express concern over the camp security? And if so, how were they addressed?
Well, first, camp security, if we were talking, for instance, about Dong Ha Combat Base, well, you get rocket fire all the time because you're right out. You're not far from the DMZ, but the North Vietnamese are there. We didn't go into. Never saw Viet Cong. I was never in a village. I was always working against the NVA, the North Vietnamese regulars, in the mountains of the DMZ or in and around those mountains. So, but Dong Ha Combat Base was one thing. When I fly into a fire base, a Marine fire base, which is where all the guns are to protect any units that are out trying to find the NVA, and firefights are all out there, it's as safe as the barbed wire fence around the perimeter and the claymore mines and the flares and everything that you have as your first line of defense coming in. So you got that going for you, or not. You know what I mean? It's like, then if you're outside the wire, you don't have any of those defenses. You're on your own, except that your radio man can always call in fire support for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how did you understand the rules of engagement, and did you always follow them, or if not, how did you deviate from them? Do you think
Good question.
the rules of engagement would have changed the outcome?
Well, for a while, if we were shot at by the North Vietnamese, we had to call in to ask if we could fire. That was the Marines. I opened fire immediately because I was in the Army, and they were telling me that. You know what I'm saying? So I only had a stand down one time and was approached about, I'm not following the rules, but I said, I never got those rules. Those are your Marine rules.
Okay.
But that didn't last very long because word got back to the American public somehow, well, not by me or anything, but that Marines were, I guess, complaining to their parents and stuff in letters or whatever. So that got thrown out with the dirty laundry.
Okay.
But yes, so I did, what you would call it was, I didn't follow the rules then, and I was never do something like that. When the 3rd Marine Division left too, I think it was in late '69, and went to Japan. I got to go to Da Nang for a while and be the CO's driver for B Company, which was all the different detachments. But then it was winding down, the war was supposed to be winding down. So there were short men at the 101st Airborne Division, so I'd have to shoot to the 101st Airborne Division and be a detachment NCO to go out with the 101st on the air assault missions. And with them, coming back from a mission, they're shaving on the helicopters coming back, and I'm going, what are you doing? They're dry shaving. They said, we have to stand in formation when we get back to Camp Eagle And I go, you have to be kidding me, man. And so when they landed, they all have to go stand in formation. I just take my team and walk away. And they go, where are you going? I said, F2 intelligence. I'm a psyoper. I'm just attached here, you know. But I wasn't going to shave my face with a razor blade and with no cream or a hot water or anything, you know what I mean? It was like, give me a break. Those kind of things are so petty and stupid.
Right.
I couldn't even believe it. But anyway.
Did you receive decorations as a result of your service, or did you discard your medals?
They're all gone. And that's all I got to say about that.
Okay. When did you first hear about the country of Vietnam?
When the war started and kids from my high school were going over, and then coming back in boxes.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy. What did you think about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution?
I don't think that it really worked out very well. You know, I mean, basically, that's all I got to say about that.
Okay. What was your opinion of the war before you were there?
Well, I thought I was going over there to fight communism. You know what I mean? I'd had no idea. Well, my concept of it now is that we were perfecting anti-personnel weapons, and we were using these poor third world type country people, where we would call them gooks and all these different things, like to dehumanize them or make them a little inferior than we were as white American people. And that we just use it as a playground to get ahead of the Russians and the commies with smart bombs, you know, defoliants. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It totally changed everything in my brain and how I look at how we work.
What did you think was the United States' reason for fighting in Vietnam?
I just told you.
You just told me that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. They have a lot of natural resources there too. And that's when the French, you know that Ho Chi Minh, I don't know if you know this, Ho Chi Minh was a busboy at restaurants in New York City. When the French were screwing with his family back in the north, in Hanoi, he went over and he started the Viet Minh, you know, and the Viet Minh are the ones that threw the French out of the country. And then we, supposedly, were going to help with the Viet Minh Accords to try and get both countries together. But we never signed anything about that, but we were going to oversee the election of, but we already knew Ho Chi Minh would win. So we sent the CIA agents over there that were supposed to be horticulturists and agriculturists, and they're the ones that put Diem in power. And then when he didn't play enough games with us, we assassinated him under Kennedy's administration, and Kennedy didn't want that to happen, but it happened anyway. Then we put another person in power. It was all puppet governments that we put in there. I went back to Vietnam 17 years ago, and I had a wonderful time. I went during the Tet Lunar New Year, and I went first to Ho Chi Minh City, which was Saigon.
Right.
Had wonderful meals, hung out with the people, hung out with soldiers, danced in the streets with all of them. Then I went up to Hanoi. I went to the Hanoi Hilton, went into John McCain's cell, walked all through there. Then I went down the street a mile and a half to the Hilton Hotel and had lunch. Bizarre. I also went into took a rickshaw or whatever down the street with my girlfriend, and we cruised into a hospital that had a lot of veterans from the war that were injured and still crippled and all that in there. And I went in and sat down with some of them and hugged them, walked around. Yeah, it was a beautiful experience, to say the least.
What was it like when you came back to the United States from Vietnam?
It was a struggle. Yeah, mentally, physically. Yeah, it was self-medicating. Had my back problems, weren't being dealt with properly. The VA back then, would have medical staff that was in the military.
Right.
And now it's all changed, man. They get the best of the best, and I got way away from them for quite a while, for many years, and then I came back probably, I don't know, 25 years ago, or maybe a little more, and found them staffed with excellent doctors and nurses, that from I guess they built some of the military hospitals, VA hospitals, close to like Shands, for instance, where you have a lot of students that are learning, and you have good doctors and nurses, and they go over to the VA hospital and give time too. I'm sure that they're paid for by the government. I don't think they're giving their time there, but they are working to take care of veterans, and that has changed everything in the way I look at them. They're really doing a good job now. Excellent work.
What did you first think of the people who opposed the war?
I didn't even care about them one way or the other before I went to Vietnam. And after I was there for a little short period of time, I'm going, these people, they don't really care about their country. They don't want to really fight for it. It was easy to see.
Right.
I'm going, so really, what are we doing here? And then when I came back from my first tour, I went back a second time. I didn't know why, I didn't understand why people were putting them down so much, like people that went to Canada. I go, that would have been a pretty good alternative, instead of what I did. But at the same time, I'm obligated. I'm not going to not go back for my second tour. I'm going back. And because number one was I wanted to make sure that anybody that's coming into PSYOPs, that's going out to the field, they need to understand more than they were trained at Fort Bragg. They need someone like me to guide them through, just like the Hulk guided me through when I first got there. But I could get them while they were still in Da Nang before they even went out to one of the 4 detachments in Northern I Corps, or in I Corps. I just was at the farthest one north in I Corps, which was the 3rd Marine Division. We also had the 1st Marine Division, we had the Americal Division, and the 101st Airborne. So PSYOPs was in every infantry unit in Vietnam. There was a PSYOP team that could be called in at any time. We went in when it was hot. We weren't just called in to come and play around. We were always called in because there was action, and they needed a team there to try to get chew hoys and get people to bring in their weapons and blah, blah, blah. It's a joke.
When and why did you get involved in anti-war activism?
It's because I didn't think that one more person should die in that war. Not one more. And who's going to be the parents? They're the last family to have a child killed there. As we're getting thrown out. We're never going to win this war, ever. Mm. Yeah. It was sad. Very sad.
When did you become involved with the VVAW?
Well, I noted that I was going to be coming up to Gainesville to go to Santa Fe Community College, and my dad was a foreman of the mail at the Pompano Post Office at the time. He became the postmaster later, but he had me working at the post office for a while through Christmas and stuff, and then I read in the newspaper about Scott Camille in the Fort Lauderdale News that he had a VVAW thing up here, and I was reading about it, and so I just cut that out, put it in my wallet, and as soon as I got to Gainesville, got myself settled, I went straight to the address that was in the newspaper. Nice. And knocked on his door and walked right in and said, "I'm with you, my brother. What do you need me for?"
What did you think of the Winter Soldier project?
Well, it was happening before me, but
Okay.
you know, we all got to. I mean, I've read all about it, and I know all about it, and I think it was good. It was good. You had to get it out there. You know, the Nixon and all of them, they could say whatever they wanted about the hippies, about Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, and all of them. They could just say, "Oh, they're just hippies," but they couldn't say that about us.
Mm.
And so I think that's why they came after us so heavy.
Did you testify in front of Congress?
No.
No. Did you see a divide between people in the VVAW?
Well, come on, we're a bunch of nut-crazed, you know, combat veterans. So everybody's going to have a point of view, but I didn't see, it wasn't like hostile. Everybody, we were all brothers, except, you know, as we all know, the informants were fed in there, Bill Eamer and all, so you always had, but I did notice that all the crazies, in the end, they were the ones that were the informants that were trying to incite us to do stuff that, it was unbelievable. I'm going, if they were coming to testify, I go, I remember he was the nut guy that wanted us to have automatic weapons. And you know what? I go, and he's the one testifying. I go, unbelievable, man. What are you going to do?
In the 1971 to 1972, what methods did you think would be the most effective at ending the war?
Staying on the streets and protesting, because they weren't going to do it if we didn't stay in the streets. You just had to keep, the anti-war movement just had to keep picking up the pace. When I went to get my global entry, my girlfriend and I, we went to West Palm Beach, where you had to, that was years ago, you had to sign up for it and all that and get your date. We went there and she was in there for 15 minutes and I went in and he starts asking me my questions and he goes, were you ever arrested? He keeps squinting at the screen and I go, yeah. He goes, how many times? I said, you'd have to really tell me, you know? He says, what was the main thing? That's what Gainesville Eight defendant, found not guilty. I said, you'll see that I was never found guilty. He goes, what is the next? I said, I took over the Washington Monument with the American Veterans Movement. We were trying to, we knew Nixon was flying back from China that day, and we didn't want him to be able to say how he sold all this grain to the farmers. We wanted him to know that we wanted him to stop giving drugs to Vietnam veterans who were committing so much suicide. And I said, so I was in jail then too, yeah. And he goes, how many more? I said, buddy, you got to tell me, man. I said, I was in jail all the time, I said, Tampa. He said, you're in Gainesville? I said, other times than that? Yeah, probably. I said, you tell me. I can't remember all of that stuff. So anyway, he said, well, you have to, he wrote 4 different things down. You have to tell me what happened to these 4 cases. Like from 71 and 72? He goes, yeah. So I said, I'll try. So I'd call up Tampa, I'm trying to archive, there's nothing like that left. I go, I have absolutely 0. So I was gonna call him back the next day, which is about 2 weeks afterwards. And in the mail, Marlene hands me an envelope and it's my card so he just threw it off, said, screw it, this guy's gonna get his card. So that's how I got my card. I didn't find anything, and I guess he couldn't find anything either because there wasn't anything to find. But I was never found guilty of anything.
When did you first hear about Watergate?
When everybody heard about it, the day that they were caught the next day. I mean, I was always into the news. Whatever date that is, I wouldn't be able to give you a date.
How was the process of planning for disrupting the Republican National Convention?
Well, there was, see, most of the planning, like, was done because Scott was, like, in charge of the coordination of it. And it was done at his house, like they say, up in that attic. Excuse me. But there were lots of other aspects to it. Like, there was going to be the March Against Murder from Fort Pierce all the way down US 1 to the Miami, and I was part of that. And I wasn't indicted yet, but there was only the Gainesville 6 at that time. They were indicted before the Republican National Convention. I was indicted after it. But there were lots of aspects to it. Everybody was coming from different sections of the country, and the caravan was supposed to meet at some place in Florida, and hundreds of vehicles following each other down there. I don't remember how it all ended.
Before the Gainesville Eight were arrested, what were you aware of with the VVAW's plan of action for the Republican National Convention?
I was fully aware of it. And it had nothing to do with what they said in the indictment.
What did you know about the 68 Chicago Convention, Kent State and all that?
Well, one of the girl that was killed at Kent State, the main one, the girls hanging over a body, I can't remember his name. He raised money for us, and I met him. He was a nice guy. His daughter was killed there.
Wow.
So got to meet him, and he raised a lot of money for our defense. He's like I say, a nice family man, good people. But of course we knew about it. We knew about it in Vietnam. Remember when I told you that we had to ask for permission? Well, they're not supposed to have live ammo, and this happened at the same time. When my missions were going on and we hear about this, and the National Guard is firing live rounds at students in America on a campus, you know what I mean? And we have to ask permission to fire at the North Vietnamese? I said, how ludicrous. What are you talking about, man? That's why I always opened up. If somebody's shooting at me, I'm shooting back, and I'm not asking anybody for permission.
Were you harassed or otherwise harmed by the federal government because of your involvement with the VVAW?
Well, yeah, is the general answer. But I found that some of the U.S. Marshals helped us out a lot and wouldn't let things happen to us if they on the down low. A couple of the FBI agents that were at my house, I'd bring them out coffee and ask them if they would like a cup of coffee when it was cold and they're sitting outside my house. I walked down there and they knew me by my name, you know what I mean? And I'd be friends with them. I was not hostile to these people. They were doing their job. Now, some of them, like Claude Meadows, who was in charge of the FBI here, he was a nasty bastard, and but he was doing what he was told, and I'm sure he believed in what they were telling him. So, was he really a nasty bastard or not? You know what I'm saying? He wanted to keep his job, but some people, like now, with what's going on, all the people in Georgia, they were Republicans, and they wouldn't go for a lie about 11,000 votes. So if he would have stood up knowing that they were lying to him, back in my day, Claude Meadows was the main agent, well, he didn't do that. Now, did he know what the truth was? I don't know. Or was he just doing his job? And if he didn't know, why didn't he try to find out? So, when we were suing them after the trial was over, Morty Stavis really was playing a lot with his head. I got to sit in with Morty Stavis is here, and I'm here, and Claude Meadows is across the table here, and Morty Stavis is no longer with us, but he was the main trial lawyer from the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York. And he would ask him a question, and he'd be sliding a piece of paper over to him while he was looking at his notes. And Claude Meadows would go to take it to read, and he'd just draw it back like this, just fucking with this guy, man. Like he fucked with us, and I loved it. I sat there going, wow. And when we take a break, I'd go outside and I go, and Morty's this old Jewish guy, man, with a beard. And I go, were you playing this guy for real? He goes, did you like that, Stan, or what? And I go, I loved it, man. I go, keep it up. Playing with his head. It was beautiful.
Can you tell me more about the trial?
Found not guilty in like 4 hours of deliberation. That tells everything you want to know about that trial. How much longer are we going to wind this up directly? I'm not a real Gabby, but go ahead. Give me some general good stuff.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure. Please.
Let me ask you a question. So, how long was like the trial for you? How long was it? What did you?
A year and a half.
A year and a half.
Well, pre-trial was the most of it. The trial was the month of August of 1973, 4, somewhere in there.
Wow.
But the pre-trial was in Tallahassee and then in Pensacola. And then the trial came to Gainesville.
That's something that doesn't really come through well in all of the, the writings about it, but I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, see, the Tallahassee is where we all had to go. That's where we had to be taken. It was to Leon County Jail. So Judge Middlebrooks was the first judge. And he would chastise us a lot verbally and say he was a World War II vet, and that, and we would yell at him, "Then so you're bombed. You drop bombs from 5 miles high, and you call us violent. You're killing animals, women, children. You don't know where your bombs are going, and yet I'm a violent man." We told him to go fuck himself. And we'd get have the U.S. Marshals come, handcuff us, and take us back to the jail in the courthouse, and we'd go to, am I in jail twice, sir? Am I in jail, or am I just like in jail? So that kind of stuff went on a lot. I think I got six contempts of court. Wow. Where I was jailed, in jail.
So let me ask one more question. This is
Sure.
Just curious. Now, all of those activist arrests that you got was pretty much, it seems like they just evaporated on the
Yeah.
And then
well, they didn't want us. They didn't want us talking. You know what I mean? If there's a trial now he's going to start telling more stuff. Get him out of the courtroom. Just shut him up. Don't like fan this kid's flame. You know what I mean? So yeah, there you go. Well, the judge is just going to let you go. Is that all right with you? And I go, well, yeah, because I got another protest I want to get over to. Yeah.
And then the contempt of court, and then those, I assume that went on a record as well?
Yeah, and they were all thrown out about a year after the trial because each judge, I had him before Judge Middlebrooks and I had him before Judge Bo Arno. I think I had 2 in Tallahassee and the rest were, I had 1 during the trial, but the others were in Pensacola. But they said that neither judge had ever totally said why I was given contempt, so they all were thrown out. Yeah, and I didn't even think about him at all. I was just advised when they were thrown out. I got a letter from the Center for Constitutional Rights that said all your contempt of court were thrown out by the judge from the appellate courts. I go, I've forgotten all about him. I wasn't going to go to jail, no matter what anyway. Yeah.
And I think we just have 2 more questions we can I'm sorry to hijack that.
No, you're helping tremendously.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
I will say, during that all that year and a half, say, of trial, how much of that was, say, in the courtroom itself? Was a lot of it, or?
Well, anytime we had to have a hearing after we moved to Pensacola, let's say, we'd all have to get there. Pete Mahoney was up in New York because he was trying to get a job and still earn his money, but he'd always have to show up. So we'd always head to Pensacola. And that's when, you know, John Mitchell was the Attorney General at one time. And I've got the picture of me and the Attorney General downstairs here. He was Nixon's Attorney General, and he had to come and answer one question, and it was, are we being wiretapped? And I think Larry Turner down there, and maybe a couple of the other attorneys were always trying to get around that question. You can only ask him this specific question. You know, he's Attorney General. And this was on Friday, and on Monday he had to testify at the Watergate hearings. So, you're gonna love this story. Like 4 of us, I think, we took off from Pensacola after that day's testimony or whatever, and John Mitchell could fly away and go home. But instead of going to Gainesville or wherever everybody was living, we took off, 4 of us, and we went up to Appalachian State College or University up in Boone, North Carolina, for dinner with his family. He was a history professor in Boone, and I guess we got there maybe at midnight or something, and his family was all up and with his kids, and we ate, and then we took off. And we were on our way to Washington, D.C. to stand in line for the Watergate hearings. So, as soon as we left, though, we found out later that the FBI car pulled in, and they were interviewed for X amount of hours, all the way until the sun came up again. So John Briggs's brother, who's down here, I guess you just interviewed him, his brother was a priest outside of Washington, D.C., so we pull into his place and had breakfast there. And of course, same thing happened to him after we left. FBI pulls in there. So then we go stand and wait for the Watergate hearings to start. And we're like 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th or something, you know, and we just camped there. And we had on our t-shirts that had a cockroach body, Nixon's head with headphones on it, said Watergate bug. And we got to go right in there. And I'm on the balcony right here. And John Mitchell comes walking right here with his attorney, the same 2 that were just with us in Pensacola. And I just, don't you lie, John Mitchell. And he looked up at me, and his eyes were this big, like how did they get in here, you know what I mean? And we just sat there, man, and listened to him. So we were at the Watergate hearings, 4 of us were.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was fun. And a woman from my high school, she was a big lawyer in D.C. at the time. Gosh, I wish I could remember her name. Anyway, she saw me at, I think, the 20th high school reunion, and she goes, I saw a picture of you in, what is it, the Library of Congress. An 8x10 picture of you in the Library of Congress pointing at John Mitchell at the Watergate hearings with your mouth open, yelling at him. I go, really? I said, can you get a picture of that and send it to me? But she said, it was quite a few years before that it was there, and she went back and there wasn't there anymore, hanging up in the Library of Congress. So I thought, yes. So that's a good story.
That's a great story.
That's a great story.
I think I just have one more question.
Sure.
To let everybody go. And that is, okay, we're at the 50th anniversary.
That's correct, yeah. It was during this same month, right? We were actually on trial today, 50 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you've had a lot of time a lot of water has gone under the bridge
Sure.
since then.
Yeah, it was a lifetime ago, you know?
So how did that at all affect the course of the rest of your life?
Oh, how could it not? Sure. Yeah, I mean, I have a sleep apnea machine because my nose was shattered and they never got it right. And finally I had an operation to Miami VA Hospital X amount of years ago, and I've been on a CPAP ever since. My spine is shot and I've got 100% disability. And I try to work with vets to get them into the system and try to help them get their disability properly set up through the VA different spots. You can get a VA representative, in almost any city in America. I always try to get them to go see your VA rep, sit down, get everything in on paper, and you got to start working on it. I mean, not just Vietnam vets, but all these wars. So I try to do that, and then I've been writing my books. And in my books, they're always it's about a character that's a Vietnam vet that has sleep apnea, and he moves to Alaska, and then I put some stories in about my experiences in the war, but I create they're fiction, and they're fun to write, and I do that, and I took piano lessons, started piano lessons at 54, and so that means I've been doing it for 20 years now, and I do 2 hours a day basically up in the mountains in North Carolina. When I wake up, after I do all my stretching and all my exercises, my weights, my swimming, then I go right to my piano, and I try to play for a couple hours and learn a new song. So that's my life, I have my kids, my grandkids. I have a wonderful family, and we all love each other. And we try to pass that love on to others.
I think I do have one more question.
Go ahead. Is this a follow-up?
I can't help myself, but I think most people would agree what y'all did was a really amazing thing to the activism against the war. It was not a popular thing to do.
No, we definitely put it on the line. Yeah.
But what about your family and all now? Do they brag about that to everyone?
Well, both of my kids were born in Gainesville. Of course, I went to Jamaica for 10 years with the CBI, the Caribbean Basin Initiative, and started a company there. And I go back sometimes, have great friends in Jamaica. My kids went to school there, before they came back. I went to, school. My son went to UCF. My daughter was here at the University of Florida. And so I have my own brick down at the field down there. It says,
Wow.
S. Michelsen, Gainesville 8, go Gators. I've gone to visit it, and my daughter has a picture taken with my grandkids every time they go to a Gator game. They stop in to visit my brick that they got me.
I'm going to look for that.
And so they all know my life, and some of my friends from high school, a lot of us were in the service, and I just was at a reunion with them in St. Augustine last week. And they even asked me, what about, your kids know about your medals and da-da-da. I said, my kids know their dad, That's all they need to know, They don't have to have a picture of something or hold something in their hand. They know me. And that's all that matters to me. And that's that. That's how it is. And they love me, and I love them.
Well, with that, if you have anything at all you'd like to add, for the record.
I'm good.
Well, thank you.
I was waving at the camera.
Thank you very much for your interview.
No problem. No problem
Really
whatsoever.
appreciate it.
All right.